The alien princess no one wanted was left for dead. Until a human medic defied them, all the galaxy had long grown used to the ruthless order of the Vierk's dominion. Every star system under their control knew fear, respect, and strict obedience. Power was measured in strength and cunning, not kindness or mercy. Empires rose and fell under their shadow, and within the royal halls of the Dominion, anything that showed weakness was not merely ignored, it was erased. That was why Princess Salith was despised from the moment she drew her first breath. The midwives whispered behind their hands when she cried. Her skin, softer than expected, bore faint traces of a rare genetic condition. Her eyes, unusually reflective, betrayed empathy in a society that valued domination. The king, a man feared across multiple sectors, had sighed the moment she was born, his disappointment echoing across the silent hall. In the Vierk's culture, a royal child was either a weapon or a symbol of fear. Salith was neither. She was an anomaly. By the age of 10, it became clear that Salith could not match the physical prowess expected of a princess of the Dominion. She faltered during combat drills, misjudged tactical simulations, and questioned orders in subtle, polite ways that annoyed her instructors. Other royal children, especially her cousins, grew cruel in response to her perceived incompetence. They mocked her. They left her behind in missions, waiting for her to fail. Each failure, though minor, was recorded in the royal archives, carefully catalogued as evidence that she was unfit to rule. Yet, despite all this, Salith survived. She learned to hide, to smile when the insults cut deep, to study quietly while others fought. She became invisible not because she wished it, but because it was safer. Even so, the whispers followed her. The princess no one wanted, the court called her behind closed doors. Servants and nobles alike treated her as if her life were a trivial matter. And when war came, and it always came for the Vierks, Salith was not sent to the command halls. She was sent to the front lines, a test of endurance that the elders assumed she would fail. The war with the coalition of alien powers had escalated quickly. Skirmishes along the border turned into full-blown space battles, fleets clashing like predatory storms. The Dominion's military doctrine demanded absolute victory, and those who failed were left behind without question. Salith, still barely more than a child by Dominion standards, was assigned a ceremonial escort fleet, a collection of older, battle-hardened ships expected to guide and protect her. It was, as many predicted, a futile attempt. The ambush came swiftly. Coalition forces had grown clever, anticipating the Dominion's usual movements. Salith's fleet, considered too minor to warrant attention, was targeted with precision. Explosions lit the void as ships twisted and tore apart under the relentless assault. Alarms screamed through her escort pod. Crew members ran frantically to their stations. Salith, terrified but determined, gripped the control panel in her small command seat. She could hear the screams of those around her, see the fire in the glass as shields failed. And then the world went silent. Her pod, one of the last intact, was torn free by the blast, drifting into unclaimed space. The Dominion had abandoned her officially. She was listed as dead, her name crossed off records with the cruel efficiency the Empire was known for. But Salith clung to life, her body battered, her systems failing, yet her mind still burning with awareness. She could see the stars through the fractured canopy of her pod, silent witnesses to her near death. And then, just as hope seemed to vanish, a faint signal appeared on her emergency sensors, a small human medical frigate. Humans were considered insignificant by most alien civilizations. Their ships were slow, lightly armed, and their influence minimal. Yet somehow they had been patrolling the sector, responding to distress signals, and now their ship approached her drifting pod. Salith's heart raced. She had never seen humans before, only heard rumors of their strange ways. Her instincts, honed for survival in a cruel empire, urged her to hide, to expect betrayal. But the humans did something the Dominion would never do. They extended a hand when no one else would. Elias Mercer was a combat medic aboard the human ship. He had grown used to seeing bodies torn apart, to triaging the dying with calm efficiency. But the moment he saw the Vierk's princess in the pod, something unusual stirred in him. Her body was a puzzle, her injuries severe, and her biology unlike anything in human medical records. He ignored the comms chatter warning him to leave her. Protocol mattered, yes, but life mattered more. Using makeshift equipment and improvisation, he stabilized her. When Salith awoke, she expected interrogation, suspicion, maybe even death. Instead, she found a human medic sitting beside her, patiently monitoring her vitals, speaking in soothing tones she barely understood but instinctively recognized as caring. The human made no demands, offered no threats, and treated her not as a princess or a failure, but as a patient in need of help. For the first time in her life, someone did not care about her lineage, her utility, or her weakness. The ship hummed around her as systems worked tirelessly to keep her alive. Salith looked through the observation window at the stars stretching into infinity, a galaxy she had never truly seen before. Her thoughts wandered to the Dominion, how quickly they had declared her unworthy, how easily they had abandoned her. Yet now she felt something foreign, trust. She had no choice but to accept it. Meanwhile, back in the Dominion, news of the lost princess had arrived. Ministers and military leaders debated her absence briefly before moving on. Their minds were occupied with politics, war strategy, and the projection of power. Salith's supposed death mattered little. Yet, across the void, humans were quietly defying that assumption. As hours passed into days, Salith began to recover under Elia's care. She marveled at the simplicity yet efficiency of human medical methods, their willingness to think outside rigid protocols. The human crew treated her like a being with value, not a liability. It frustrated and fascinated her in equal measure. How could a species so unremarkable in the eyes of the Dominion display such determination, such honor, and such disregard for their own safety just to save one life? The question gnawed at her. Salith began to observe them in silence, noting their interactions, their teamwork, and their quiet strength. She saw humans arguing, laughing, and bickering, yet somehow managing to work in perfect coordination during crises. She saw courage that did not rely on superior weaponry, strength, or cunning, but on sheer will and ingenuity. It was unlike anything she had been taught to respect, and yet she found herself wanting to understand it. Night after night, she lay in the med bay, listening to the hum of the ship's engines, thinking about the world she had lost and the strange, unexpected haven she had found. The galaxy she knew was brutal and unforgiving, yet in this small human ship, she felt a flicker of hope. The humans had no interest in her crown, no desire for political gain, no intention of using her as a pawn. They only wanted to save her. And for someone who had been told she was worthless her entire life, that simple act of defiance against the expectations of her own empire was revolutionary. Unbeknownst to her, her presence aboard the ship was already causing ripples in human networks. Messages from allied species reported sightings of a mysterious Orcs survivor. Rumors spread, some mocking, some curious, but none of them considered that humans had deliberately intervened. Within the quiet corridors of her recovery room, Salith realized that she was witnessing something entirely new, a species that refused to follow the rules of power as she had always known them. By the end of the first week, she could sit up and speak more coherently. Her thoughts, still clouded with pain and trauma, began to form a plan of their own. She wondered if survival was enough. She wondered if she would ever return to the Dominion, and if so, what she would do. But one thing was clear. Humans had changed the rules simply by being human, and Salith, abandoned and unwanted, had been given a chance to witness a force far more powerful than dominance or fear, a force built on empathy, courage, and defiance. And deep within her, a seed of something new began to grow. Perhaps this life given to her by the humans could be more than mere survival. Perhaps she could learn strength not measured in conquest or cruelty, but in the ability to defy expectation, to endure, and to choose who she wanted to be. The galaxy outside remained vast and dangerous, yet for the first time, Princess Salith did not feel completely alone. Somewhere in the stars, a species underestimated by all had reached out a hand, and she had no choice but to take it. The human ship moved steadily through unclaimed space, its engines humming quietly against the vast darkness. Princess Salith, once abandoned and declared dead, now rested in the med bay under the watchful eyes of Elia's mercer. Each day, her strength returned slowly, her wounds healing under careful attention. The alien princess had never known care like this. In the Dominion, survival often meant ignoring pain, suppressing fear, and obeying commands without question. Here, humans treated her not as a political tool or an expendable asset, but as someone whose life mattered. Salith spent hours observing the humans around her. She noticed small details that seemed trivial but fascinated her. They argued over minor disagreements, laughed loudly in the mess hall, and comforted one another after long shifts. Yet when danger arose, their disagreements vanished, replaced by seamless cooperation. She saw men and women with no physical advantage rush into hazardous situations, guided by instinct, intelligence, and mutual trust. Humans did not command with fear. They inspired with resolve. Elias spent hours beside her, explaining basic medical procedures in simple words, teaching her about human methods, and sometimes just talking to ease her mind. He did not ask her to repay him, did not demand loyalty, and never treated her as if she owed anything for surviving. This puzzled Salith. In the Dominion, everyone owed something to someone, and failure to repay that debt meant disgrace or death. These humans, however, were free, yet bound together by choice rather than fear. She felt a strange mix of admiration and envy. The first attempt at communication with Salith's homeworld had already been made. The Dominion, hearing that a princess had survived, immediately demanded her return. Their message was stern, laced with threats and reminders of her supposed duty. Human commanders, however, ignored the tone of entitlement. They responded simply. Salith was under human protection, and any attempt to forcibly retrieve her would be met with defense. The humans had no desire for war, yet they would not leave a life in danger. Salith listened as her story became known across human networks. Other species had underestimated humans for centuries, labeling them weak, slow, and irrelevant. Now, these same humans had saved a royal life abandoned by a powerful empire. The irony was not lost on her. For the first time, she realized the galaxy was not as simple as the Dominion had taught her. Strength was not only in power, technology, or armies. It could lie in courage, in compassion, and in the unwillingness to abandon someone, no matter the risk. Days passed, and Salith's physical recovery brought new challenges. Her alien physiology demanded constant monitoring. Humans could stabilize her wounds, but long-term care required creativity. Elia's improvised equipment, modified stimulators, and cross-referenced alien biology with human medicine in ways no one had tried before. He refused to give up even when the odds seemed impossible. Watching him, Salith noticed something about humans she had never encountered in the Dominion. They treated failure as a problem to solve, not as shame to punish. As Salith regained her strength, she began moving beyond the med bay, exploring the human ship. Each corridor, engine room, and observation deck revealed the methodical, yet humble life of a species she had once dismissed as inconsequential. Humans did not display arrogance or entitlement. They carried themselves with quiet confidence, relying on skill, teamwork, and ingenuity rather than brute force. Salith began to record their habits mentally, cataloging behaviors, decisions, and problem-solving methods. She realized she was learning more about leadership and strength here than in her entire life within the royal palace. Despite her fascination, Salith could not ignore the threats that still loomed. The Dominion would not accept her survival lightly. In private, she discussed strategy with Elias, not revealing her own intentions yet, but testing the humans' resolve. Their commitment to her safety impressed her deeply. They had no obligation to risk their lives for an alien, yet they did, simply because they chose to uphold life. Their morality was not dictated by hierarchy or fear. It was chosen, and chosen with deliberate strength. Then the first sign of danger arrived. Scouts from the Dominion's fleet had located the human ship. The Vierk's retrieval team was elite, trained to neutralize targets with precision and efficiency. They expected an easy capture. After all, the humans were not a significant military threat. Salith observed the incoming fleet with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She knew the Dominion's reputation, cruelty, ruthlessness, and unflinching loyalty. She expected humans to flee, surrender, or negotiate as others would. What she saw instead stunned her. The humans prepared for defense with calm determination. They deployed shields, set up evacuation protocols, and coordinated with each other without hesitation. Elias briefed the crew in clear, concise terms, and despite their inferior firepower, there was no panic. Salith saw humans move with the confidence of a predator in the hunt, yet they were driven not by ambition or aggression, but by protection. Her fascination grew. These beings, so underestimated, were proving themselves capable of defying expectation in ways the Dominion could never imagine. The retrieval fleet arrived in the system, their ships cutting across the void like blades. Communication came in the form of orders: surrender the princess immediately or face destruction. Salith listened silently as human officers discussed tactics. They were realistic about their disadvantages, yet unwavering in their decision. They would not abandon her. Her heart pounded as she realized she was witnessing a new form of power, a force that did not rely on fear or coercion, but on unity, resolve, and moral certainty. The first skirmish began in orbit. The Dominion's ships fired with precision, expecting minimal resistance. The humans responded with unexpected ingenuity, using evasive maneuvers, calculated countermeasures, and improvised weaponry to buy time. Salith watched from the observation deck, her breath catching as humans she had grown to respect moved with precision and courage. Their efforts were not flawless, but they were relentless. Each human action seemed to say, "We will not leave anyone behind, no matter the cost." In those tense hours, Salith reflected on her life. She had always believed that power was measured by control, fear, and domination. Here she saw a different metric: strength measured by commitment, courage, and defiance against impossible odds. Humans did not boast of their victories. They acted, they protected, they persisted. She realized that if the Dominion had truly understood humans, they might never have underestimated them. Amidst the battle, Salith began to see her own potential in a new light. Abandoned and unwanted by her people, she had survived not through strength alone, but by choosing to accept help, by observing, and by thinking critically. Humans had shown her a way to survive that did not rely on domination or cruelty. The lessons were subtle yet profound. Intelligence, adaptability, and moral courage could rival any fleet, any weapon, any empire. By the time the first skirmish ended, the Dominion's forces had withdrawn temporarily, reassessing the unexpected resistance. Humans had sustained damage, but their commitment had protected Salith. She realized that the galaxy would soon have to see humans in a different light, not as weak observers, but as capable, resilient, and morally unyielding actors. And as she looked at Elias, exhausted but determined, she understood something else. Her life was no longer controlled by the Dominion. It was, for the first time, her own. In the following days, Salith recovered fully, walking through the corridors of the human ship with cautious confidence. She observed humans training, repairing systems, and strategizing. She listened to their conversations, noting their laughter, disagreements, and unwavering teamwork. For the first time, she felt that she could belong somewhere. Not because of her rank or title, but because humans had chosen to see her as more than her flaws, more than her uselessness. She began to ask questions, subtle ones at first, about human society, morality, and history. Elias answered patiently, revealing a species that had survived countless wars, diseases, and hardships not by dominating others, but by choosing to protect, learn, and adapt. Salith's curiosity deepened into admiration. She began to think not of herself as abandoned, but as part of something larger, an experiment in morality, courage, and resilience. Even as the Dominion prepared its next moves, Salith's confidence grew. She realized that survival was not enough. Understanding, learning, and adaptation could change the balance of power in ways the Dominion had never considered. The humans were teaching her that life was more than obedience, more than duty, more than domination. It was about choices, courage, and defiance in the face of impossible odds. And as she watched the stars pass by outside the observation deck, she knew that the galaxy would never look the same to her again. The humans had shown her something the Dominion could not comprehend: that the smallest, most underestimated species could stand against empires, defy expectations, and protect the vulnerable. And in that realization, Salith felt something she had never felt before: hope. The days following the skirmish passed in a tense rhythm aboard the human ship. Princess Salith moved carefully through the corridors, still fragile but growing stronger with each step. She observed humans with a curiosity that bordered on fascination. Their efficiency was remarkable, but it was not the mechanical precision she expected from a superior race. It was choice. They acted with intent, guided by principles that seemed alien to her, yet entirely logical. They fought, repaired, healed, and calculated not out of fear or ambition, but because they believed it was the right thing to do. Salith had grown accustomed to the quiet hum of the ship's engines, the low chatter of the crew, and the disciplined routines that balanced life with preparedness for danger. Unlike the Dominion, humans did not rely on hierarchy to enforce obedience. Every member had a role, yes, but they contributed willingly, guided by knowledge and experience. Salith listened to them strategize for hours, noting how disagreements never became threats but instead sparked innovative solutions. She realized that humans viewed challenges as problems to solve, not battles to dominate. Elias Mercer became her primary guide. He encouraged her to move, to exercise, and to participate in discussions about ship operations. The Dominion had trained her to follow orders blindly, yet here she was asked for input, valued for her observations. Her mind, sharpened by years of expectation and fear, began to notice patterns, to anticipate outcomes, and to think in ways the humans recognized. She realized that for the first time, her intelligence and unique perspective were appreciated rather than dismissed. As Salith regained her strength, the Dominion did not remain idle. Communications came daily, alternating between veiled threats, subtle bribes, and demands for her return. The Vierk's ministers called her the Forgotten Pawn, insisting that her life held no value beyond political usefulness. Yet the humans ignored these provocations. Their replies were brief and firm. Salith was under human protection, and no imperial demand could change that. To the Dominion, this was shocking. Their expectations of fear and obedience were being ignored. One afternoon, Salith stood at the observation deck, watching a distant star cluster spin slowly in the void. Elias approached quietly, holding a small data pad. "They're not giving up," he said, his tone calm but measured. "The Dominion wants her back. They'll try again, maybe sooner than we expect." Salith studied him carefully. "They do not understand humans," she said softly, her voice still carrying the faint accent of her homeworld. "They think strength is only in weapons and fear. They cannot see what they are facing." Elias nodded. "They're going to find out soon enough." It came sooner than anyone expected. The Dominion's next fleet appeared not as a simple retrieval squad, but as a coordinated strike force equipped for precision combat. They assumed the humans were weak, unorganized, and incapable of real resistance. What they found instead was a calculated defense designed to protect Salith at all costs. The humans had limited firepower, yet their strategy exploited every advantage: terrain of asteroids, gravitational pulls, and adaptive maneuvers that anticipated Dominion movements before they occurred. Salith watched from the observation deck, heart racing, as human crews moved with a calm determination that was almost unnatural. She had seen bravery before, but not like this. Humans risked their lives to protect someone they barely knew, not for reward or recognition, but because it was the right choice. Their courage was quiet, methodical, and unstoppable. The Dominion fleet fired relentlessly, expecting panic. They were met instead with precision coordination and relentless countermeasures that forced them to withdraw temporarily. In the med bay, Elias explained what had happened. "They'll try again," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But we've learned their patterns. We're ready." Salith absorbed every word. She began to see that humans possessed a form of power the Dominion had never understood. It was not dominance or fear. It was unity, creativity, and the refusal to abandon those in need. She began to think beyond survival, beyond her own recovery. Perhaps there was a way she could use this knowledge to change more than her own fate. Over the following days, Salith spent time training with the crew, not in combat. She was still too weak, but in strategy and observation. Humans encouraged her to think critically, to suggest solutions, and to participate in decision-making. She realized that the value of life, intelligence, and choice was a form of strength her empire had never taught her. While the Dominion prized power for its own sake, humans had shown her that strength could be moral, deliberate, and unstoppable when guided by courage and principle. One evening, a communications officer approached Salith with hesitation. "Princess," he said, "we intercepted a message from a neutral species observing this region. They are surprised that humans are protecting you. They say it is unprecedented." Salith smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and disbelief. "They will learn," she said. "Humans are not what they think. They never have been." Tensions escalated further when a Dominion assassin ship slipped past the perimeter. Its mission was simple: eliminate Salith before she could fully recover. Humans detected it almost immediately, yet they did not panic. Instead, they deployed a trap, using the ship's agility and knowledge of the surrounding asteroid field to immobilize the intruder. When the Dominion agent attempted to breach the med bay, Elias intercepted, not with brute force, but with precise tactical measures that disabled the ship without unnecessary loss of life. Salith watched in amazement. The humans had done what the Dominion believed impossible. They protected her without unnecessary aggression, using intelligence and strategy rather than dominance. The lesson was clear: power without wisdom was dangerous, but courage with intelligence could overcome even the most formidable adversaries. She felt a quiet shift within herself. Survival alone was no longer enough. She needed to understand, to learn, and perhaps to lead in ways her empire had never taught. In the following week, she began speaking with crew members individually, learning about human history, culture, and philosophy. She discovered a species that had survived countless threats, from disease to invasion, not by dominating others, but by adapting, protecting, and innovating. She realized that humans valued life in a way the Dominion could not comprehend, and that their resilience was built not on fear but on connection. Salith also reflected on her own upbringing. The Dominion had abandoned her because she was weak, because she did not fit their rigid definition of strength. But here, she learned that what had been called weakness could be turned into insight, observation, and strategy. She began to see herself differently, not as a failure, but as someone capable of learning, growing, and influencing events in ways her empire had never allowed. As the days turned into weeks, Salith's recovery became complete. She could move freely, observe the operations of the ship, and contribute meaningfully to planning and strategy. Yet the Dominion had not forgotten her. Reports indicated that they were amassing a larger fleet, determined to recover their unwanted princess and punish the humans for interference. When the fleet appeared, Salith watched alongside the crew, heart steady and mind alert. The Dominion expected terror, surrender, or submission. Instead, they faced humans who had become her protectors, humans who would not abandon her under any circumstances. Salith felt a profound sense of connection with them. These beings, so underestimated by the galaxy, were proving that courage and intelligence could rival fleets, weapons, and centuries of political power. During the battle, Salith observed her own reactions. She felt fear, yes, but it was tempered by understanding. She knew the humans would act, would defend, and would endure. She began to recognize patterns in their decision-making, strategies that might have escaped even the most advanced Dominion minds. For the first time, she felt not like a pawn, but like an observer capable of insight and foresight, a participant rather than a liability. After the skirmish, the Dominion fleet withdrew, forced to reassess. Humans had succeeded not by destruction, but by defiance and strategy. Salith felt a quiet thrill. This was a new type of power, one that her empire had never taught, one that relied on courage, intelligence, and moral certainty rather than fear and domination. She realized that if the galaxy ever learned this lesson, the balance of power would shift dramatically. That night, Salith stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. She thought of the Dominion, of their cruelty and rigidity, and of how they had abandoned her. She thought of humans, of their courage and ingenuity, and of how they had saved her life when no one else would. For the first time, she felt hope, not just for survival, but for understanding, growth, and perhaps even change. Elias approached quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've come a long way," he said. "Not just in body, but in mind. You see things differently now, don't you?" Salith nodded slowly. "I do. Humans, they teach without intending to. They fight, they protect, and they endure. They are stronger than anyone gives them credit for." He smiled faintly. "And they have chosen to protect you. That counts for more than anything the Dominion ever taught you." As she gazed into the infinite expanse of space, Salith understood the profound truth she had learned. Strength was not only in power or fear, but in courage, empathy, and the willingness to act when others would turn away. Humanity had defied expectations, saved a life declared worthless, and in doing so had shown her a new way to view the universe. The galaxy would soon discover that the smallest, most underestimated species could stand against empires, defy expectations, and protect those no one else would. Salith had witnessed it firsthand, and she knew her life and her understanding of power would never be the same again. The Dominion believed her dead, but she was alive, stronger in mind and spirit than they could ever anticipate. And humans had taught her the reason why. The Dominion did not forget the encounter. News of their retrieval fleet's failure spread quickly through the Imperial channels, accompanied by whispers of human defiance that seemed almost impossible. A species considered weak, insignificant, and expendable had not only protected a Vierk's princess, but had actively resisted an elite force. Within the halls of power, ministers and generals debated furiously. The king demanded an immediate solution. Salith must be returned, dead or alive, to restore the Dominion's pride. Yet every plan they devised faltered against the humans' unpredictable courage and strategy. On board the human ship, Salith had grown accustomed to the rhythms of her new life. She moved freely through the corridors, observing and learning. Crew members had begun to treat her less like a patient and more like an advisor, though she was careful not to overstep. Every discussion, every strategy meeting became a lesson in observation, morality, and ingenuity. She had learned from the humans that power did not need to be enforced with fear. It could be exercised with intelligence, courage, and empathy. One morning, as the ship drifted near a dense asteroid belt, communications lit up with warnings of an incoming fleet. The Dominion had escalated, bringing multiple cruisers and strike ships to overwhelm the human defenders. They expected a quick surrender. After all, humans lacked the firepower and numbers to resist such a force. But they underestimated the humans' adaptability. Elias Mercer convened the crew in the command room. "They think this is going to be easy," he said quietly. "They think we'll panic. We won't. Remember what we do best: protect, adapt, and survive. We fight smart, not brute." Salith listened intently, absorbing the human approach to defense. Their methods were deliberate, creative, and deeply moral. They did not seek to destroy for the sake of victory. They sought to protect life, including hers. As the fleet arrived, Salith watched the humans take positions with calm precision. Shields flared, defense grids activated, and smaller fighter ships maneuvered through the asteroid field with expert timing. The Dominion unleashed a torrent of firepower, expecting chaos. Instead, they encountered calculated resistance. Human fighters lured larger ships into ambushes, using the environment to their advantage. Every move was designed not to destroy for pride, but to preserve life. Salith's understanding of humans deepened during the battle. She observed their willingness to risk their own lives to protect others, their strategic thinking that leveraged intelligence rather than raw power, and their moral clarity that allowed them to act decisively. It was a form of strength the Dominion could not comprehend, a combination of courage, intelligence, and empathy. She realized that this approach could change the galaxy if others understood it. During a brief lull in the fighting, Salith stood at the observation deck, contemplating the incoming messages from her empire. They demanded her surrender, mocking the humans for their foolish defiance. She considered the possibility of returning under Dominion control, but the thought made her chest tighten. She had survived abandonment once. She would not allow herself to be sacrificed again. The humans had shown her a path beyond fear, beyond obedience, beyond the rigid rules of her empire. She could not unsee it. That evening she approached Elias quietly. "They will not stop," she said. "Their fleets, their threats, they will continue until they succeed. Humans cannot hold them forever." Elias shook his head gently. "We are not holding them forever. We are buying time, and time is a weapon humans know how to use. You've seen it. The Dominion does not understand that strength comes from choice, from courage, from refusing to abandon those in need." Salith nodded slowly, feeling the truth in his words. The humans' defiance was more than physical resistance. It was a statement about moral power. They were proving that even the most underestimated species could stand against empires without succumbing to fear or oppression. The next assault came swiftly, catching the human crew off guard but not unprepared. The Dominion's fleet had adapted, deploying specialized boarding ships designed to bypass shields and directly extract her from the human vessel. Humans responded with ingenuity and teamwork, creating decoy pods, diversionary attacks, and complex maneuvers that frustrated the invaders. Salith watched, heart-pounding, as humans placed themselves in harm's way not for reward, not for glory, but to protect her life. Amidst the chaos, she began to contribute actively. Drawing on lessons from the humans, she suggested tactical adjustments, points of observation, and potential weaknesses in the Dominion fleet's coordination. Elias listened carefully, nodding, and implementing some of her ideas. For the first time in her life, she realized her thoughts, her decisions, and her intelligence could make a difference in a life-or-death situation. The humans were teaching her not only how to survive, but also how to act decisively and courageously. Hours of battle stretched into tense days. The Dominion fleet had underestimated human resilience, intelligence, and moral courage. Ships were damaged, pilots exhausted, but their determination did not waver. Salith witnessed human ingenuity that defied expectation, from impromptu shield synchronization to coordinated fighter strikes using minimal resources. Every action was deliberate, every risk calculated, every life valued. The Dominion had assumed submission, they found defiance. In the quiet moments between attacks, Salith reflected on her life. She had once believed that strength was dominance, that survival meant bending to power, that her value depended on usefulness to an empire that had rejected her. But humans had taught her a new form of strength, one based on courage, intelligence, empathy, and choice. They had protected her when everyone else abandoned her, risking everything for a life deemed unworthy by the galaxy's most powerful empire. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A Dominion cruiser, attempting to ram the human vessel, misjudged its trajectory, and human pilots seized the opportunity. Using clever tactics, they disabled the cruiser without unnecessary loss of life. The Dominion forces, shocked by their inability to predict human creativity, began to retreat, their confidence shaken. Salith realized in that moment that humans had something her empire could never replicate, a combination of moral courage and strategic intelligence that made them unpredictable, unstoppable, and formidable. Even as the Dominion withdrew, Salith understood the broader implications. The galaxy was witnessing something extraordinary. Humans, dismissed for centuries, were demonstrating that courage, intelligence, and morality could outweigh technology and sheer numbers. This realization was not lost on her. She began to see herself not as a victim, but as a participant in a greater lesson, a lesson that could challenge centuries of imperial arrogance. That night, after repairs and recovery, the crew gathered in the mess hall. Salith observed quietly, noting their interactions, the camaraderie, and the quiet pride that came from overcoming impossible odds without compromising their ethics. She understood that humans were not seeking recognition. They acted because it was right. Their victories were moral victories as much as tactical ones. For the first time in her life, she felt the possibility of hope beyond survival. Elias approached her again. "You've changed," he said. "You're seeing the galaxy differently now?" Salith nodded. "Yes. I see that strength is not measured by fear or weapons. It is measured by courage, intelligence, and the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Humans, they embody that." He smiled faintly. "And you're learning it too, that's why we fight together." In the following days, Salith began documenting observations, strategies, and lessons learned. She discussed ideas with Elias and other officers, helping refine tactics that could save lives in future encounters. Her intelligence, once ignored, became an asset, appreciated and respected. She realized that the humans had not only saved her life, they had expanded her understanding of power, courage, and morality in ways the Dominion could never teach. The Dominion, furious at their failure, intensified their threats, sending messages filled with disdain and arrogance. They could not comprehend that humans had acted out of principle rather than self-interest. They assumed that fear and dominance would work where power alone had failed. Salith, however, understood something they could not. Humans did not need fear to succeed. Their defiance was moral, deliberate, and strategic, a force the galaxy had never anticipated. By the end of the fourth week, the human ship had repaired its systems, trained its crew, and prepared for further challenges. Salith stood on the observation deck, watching the stars with a newfound clarity. She understood that her survival was not merely a personal triumph, it was proof of a larger truth. Empires could underestimate humans, rulers could dismiss courage, and the galaxy could label lives as insignificant. But intelligence, courage, and moral clarity could overcome even the most formidable odds. And as she watched the stars stretch into infinity, she felt a quiet determination. The Dominion had abandoned her, but she would not be powerless again. Humans had shown her the path, to protect, to think, to act with courage, and to defy expectation. She was no longer a passive survivor. She was a participant in a new reality, one where humans' defiance could shift the balance of power, where her own choices could matter, and where the galaxy might finally recognize that the smallest, most underestimated species could stand against the greatest empires. Salith realized that the story of her survival and the humans who had saved her was only beginning. The Dominion would not stop. They never did. But humans, she understood, were not ordinary. Their courage, intelligence, and moral resolve had already rewritten the rules of engagement. She had learned that true power was not in fear, domination, or rank, but in the choice to act, to protect, and to endure. And in that understanding, Salith felt the spark of something extraordinary, the knowledge that the galaxy was witnessing the rise of a force it had long ignored, a force built not on conquest, but on courage, empathy, and the refusal to abandon the defenseless. The humans had defied expectations once. They would do it again, and Salith, once unwanted and abandoned, would stand alongside them, ready to witness the galaxy change forever. The Dominion had grown impatient. Weeks of failure, their most elite fleets repelled by what they considered a weak, insignificant species, had ignited fury across the Empire. Every minister, general, and commander demanded decisive action. Princess Salith, the abandoned and unwanted heir, had become a symbol of humiliation they could not tolerate. They planned a massive assault, one meant to erase both the human ship and the princess in a single, decisive strike. But the humans were ready. Over the past weeks, Salith had learned, observed, and contributed in ways that her empire had never anticipated. She understood their thinking, their strategies, and even some of their weaknesses. Her insights, combined with the humans' ingenuity, had transformed a fragile medical vessel into a formidable defense platform. For the first time, she felt a sense of agency, not just surviving but shaping the outcome. As the Dominion fleet entered the sector, its vast ships casting shadows across the void, Salith stood at the observation deck, heart steady, mind alert. She watched the coordinated movements of the enemy, noting patterns in their formation and anticipating their first strike. Elias and the crew moved with quiet efficiency, preparing every system, every shield, every fighter for the battle that would decide their fates. Salith felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was not only survival, it was a test of everything she had learned from humans: courage, intelligence, and moral resolve. The battle began with an onslaught of plasma fire and missile barrages. Dominion cruisers pressed forward, confident that their superior numbers and firepower would overwhelm the human vessel. But humans had anticipated the attack. Fighters darted through asteroid fields, luring larger ships into traps. Shields were adjusted in real time, dispersing attacks and protecting critical systems. Salith, observing the patterns, suggested tactical maneuvers that gave the humans critical advantages. Her intelligence, once dismissed as weakness, became an invaluable tool. Hours stretched into tense cycles of attack and counterattack. Dominion commanders were frustrated by the humans' unpredictability. Every move designed to crush the medical ship was met with ingenuity, discipline, and resilience. Salith watched the humans place themselves in danger not for glory, not for reward, but for principle. Every pilot, every engineer, every medic acted with unwavering commitment to life and justice. During a lull in the battle, Salith approached Elias. "They will not give up," she said. "They will keep sending ships until they succeed or we are destroyed." Elias shook his head. "Then we keep doing what we've done all along: protect, adapt, survive. It's not about winning in the way they think. It's about showing them something they've never understood. Humans do not bow to fear." Salith nodded. She felt a surge of determination. The Dominion had abandoned her, labeled her weak, and tried to erase her existence. But she was alive, stronger in mind and spirit than ever before. And humans had taught her that survival alone was not enough. Courage, intelligence, and moral resolve could reshape the galaxy. The Dominion launched their final wave, concentrating fire on the human ship. Massive cruisers unleashed volleys of missiles, plasma beams, and electronic warfare, expecting chaos. But the human crew remained calm. Fighters launched to intercept, shields modulated to absorb and deflect attacks, and every system operated with precision. Salith contributed observations, noting vulnerabilities in the enemy's approach and suggesting adjustments to tactics. For the first time in her life, her ideas were valued not as a failure, but as critical to survival. Amid the chaos, Salith noticed a shift in the Dominion commanders. Their confidence was faltering. They had assumed that fear and dominance would force humans into submission, but each attempt to intimidate, each maneuver to overpower, was met with unexpected intelligence and moral defiance. Humans did not flinch. They acted with purpose, not emotion. And Salith understood that this was the lesson the galaxy would remember. The turning point came when Salith suggested an audacious plan. Use the asteroid field to divide the Dominion fleet, luring smaller groups into traps while larger vessels were delayed by gravity distortions and debris. Ilias approved, and the human ship executed the maneuver flawlessly. Dominion cruisers became disorganized, their attacks staggered and ineffective. Fighters moved with precision, disabling critical systems without unnecessary destruction. Salith felt a rush of satisfaction. Strategy, intelligence, and courage were proving more powerful than sheer force. As the Dominion fleet faltered, Salith realized that the battle was not just physical, it was a psychological turning point. Their arrogance, their reliance on fear and superiority, had blinded them. Humans, underestimated for centuries, had proven that moral courage and strategic intelligence could defy expectations and reshape outcomes. Salith felt a new sense of purpose. She had survived abandonment, learned from humans, and now she could see the galaxy in a different light. During the final phase of the battle, the human ship executed coordinated strikes that disabled key Dominion ships. Fighters moved in precision formations, taking out weapons systems and communication arrays. Shields absorbed massive attacks while the crew worked tirelessly to maintain operational integrity. Salith observed, noting every detail, understanding the principles behind every human action. She realized that this was more than survival. It was a demonstration of what humanity could achieve when united by principle and courage. Finally, the Dominion fleet began to retreat, their confidence shattered, their plans undone. The humans had not merely survived, they had triumphed against impossible odds. Salith felt a profound sense of respect and gratitude for the crew around her. They had shown her that courage, intelligence, and empathy were forces that could rival empires. The galaxy had underestimated them, but she would never forget what she had witnessed. In the aftermath, Salith and the humans assessed the damage. The ship required repairs and the crew needed rest, but the victory was undeniable. She walked through the corridors, observing the humans working with dedication and humility. They did not boast. They did not claim glory. They acted because it was right, because lives depended on it, because they had chosen to defy expectations. Ilias approached her once more. "You've seen it firsthand," he said. "The galaxy thinks we're insignificant, but we're not. We act when others fail. We protect when others abandon. That is our strength." Salith nodded. "I understand now. Strength is not power alone. It is courage, intelligence, and the refusal to abandon those in need. You have taught me more than the Dominion ever could." In the following days, communications from neutral species began to pour in. News of the human ship's defiance, their courage, and their protection of Salith spread across the galaxy. Other civilizations began to question the Dominion's arrogance. Rumors spread that humans, long dismissed as weak and insignificant, could challenge empires and protect the vulnerable with unmatched determination. Salith realized that this moment was more than personal survival. It was the beginning of a paradigm shift. Salith reflected on her own life. The Dominion had abandoned her, labeled her weak, and expected her to die. Yet humans had defied those expectations. They had saved her, taught her, and shown her a new form of strength. She understood now that her survival was proof of something greater. Courage, intelligence, and moral clarity could defy even the most powerful empires. In private, Salith considered her future. The Dominion might continue to pursue her, but she was no longer powerless. She had learned from humans that influence and leadership could be earned through action, principle, and courage. Survival alone was not enough. She needed to use what she had learned to change the balance of power, to protect others, and to ensure that no life would be abandoned as hers had been. As the human ship moved through the stars, repairing and preparing for future threats, Salith stood at the observation deck, watching distant systems pass by. She felt a sense of purpose she had never known. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, yet she was no longer a victim of circumstance. She had survived, learned, and grown stronger. Humans had shown her a path, one built on courage, intelligence, and empathy. Elias approached quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The Dominion will not give up easily," he said, "but neither will we. You've seen what humans can do when they refuse to bow to fear." Salith looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "And now I know. Strength is not in domination, but in courage, intelligence, and the choice to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Humans, you have changed everything I thought I knew." In the following months, Salith began working with the human crew to develop strategies that could protect vulnerable systems across the galaxy. Her insight into the Dominion, combined with the humans' ingenuity, created a network of defenders that no empire could easily ignore. She realized that survival was not enough. Action, courage, and moral clarity could reshape the balance of power. Word of the humans' actions spread far and wide. Other species began to recognize that courage and intelligence could rival empires. Salith, once unwanted and abandoned, had become a symbol, not of royalty, but of resilience, learning, and the transformative power of principle. Humans had saved her life, but they had also changed her understanding of what it meant to be strong. And as she looked out into the infinite expanse of stars, Salith knew the galaxy would never be the same. The Dominion had underestimated humans, but the universe had learned a crucial lesson. Even the smallest, most underestimated species could rise, protect, and defy expectations. Humanity's courage, intelligence, and moral resolve had proven unstoppable, and the galaxy had witnessed it firsthand. Salith smiled faintly. She was alive. She had learned, grown, and been transformed. And as long as humans stood, no life would be abandoned, no voice ignored, and no hope extinguished. The story of the alien princess abandoned by her empire had become a story of resilience, courage, and the undeniable strength of humanity. And in the silent vastness of space, the galaxy finally understood what it had long dismissed. Humans were not weak. They were unstoppable when they chose to protect, endure, and defy.